My name is Vanya Galicia. I feel like my introduction was already kind of done, so I don't really want to repeat myself. If you have a phone and you would like to have this presentation on your phone, you can go ahead and slide that QR code. It'll also have other resources and links to a bunch of things. And Fresh New London was already shouted out, but I want to shout them out one more time because my program was actually inspired by Fresh New London out in Wyndham, right when I think I was maybe probably 12 years old is when the program was starting. I wasn't involved yet until I was 16. But around that time, my director, Sally Milius, had heard about what Fresh New London was doing out here. And she was inspired to figure out how to also engage young people in their local community gardens, along with Alice of the food co-op over there in Willimantic. And that, I think, is really important to just name how different communities inspire each other and create similar kind of initiatives in their community. So we're going to be talking today about food justice and also how to move closer to having everyone have the right to food. So I just have a quick little definition up here of what food justice is. So food justice promotes a food system that is inclusive, community-led, participatory, without the exploitation of people, land, or the environment, and identifies and acts to remove significant structural inequities that exist within our food and economic system. And food justice movements seek to establish healthy and resilient communities with equitable access to nourishing and culturally appropriate food. So within this definition itself, you can see that there's a lot more than just getting food to people, but getting the food that people want, making sure that you include people in the process of what food they want, including them in the process of creating any other system structures or organizations, movements as well that affect them directly. And that it's also doesn't only include people, but it also includes the environment, every other species that's living and cohabiting in the environment, and the planet itself and the resources as well. Food systems and food system justice work really connects everybody because everybody eats food. So whether you think it affects you or it doesn't affect you, you are part of the system because you eat food. And if you don't eat food, then I'll be a little surprised. Further looking into the right to food, I have a definition here. So the right to food is adequate food that is realized when every man, woman, and child, alone or in a community with others, has the physical and economic access at all times to adequate food or for its procurement. So there's a couple different aspects that I'll talk about food and what makes just food. But some key points highlighted here is that people have the actual ability to access food regardless of their own physical ability, regardless of their own economic status, and adequate food, meaning not just any food, but food that they actually want, food that is nourishing to them, food that is relevant to them and their culture as well. So here are some of the kind of key elements of just food. I have adequacy, accessibility, sustainability, and availability. So when we think about adequacy, we're thinking about food that is satiating, food that is enough, right? Not just a little bit of food that takes into account people's identities, like their age, whether they have some type of health concern, whether they have some type of cultural or religious, boundary or anything like that, but also food that is safe for consumption. So meaning food that is healthy for one's health, that is going to be nourishing and feeds us and keeps us going. And I think that's really important because when we look at different models in the food system, there are a lot of places where people may be trying their best to donate food. And yes, some food is better than no food, but we should be moving towards having food that is adequate. So food that is going to meet the actual needs of the people who are receiving it. Then in accessibility, we're talking about whether it's being able to actually get the foods, whether that means driving or walking, also as well as economics, so people can buy it at a just rate, but also that they're not compromising other necessities in their life, such as rent, housing, education, or other things like that, that when it comes to making their budget, they're not well, I'm gonna eat a little less, or I'm not gonna be doing this so I can make it to other ends. And again, it takes into account physical ability as well. Some of these are very similar, but they're a little different in like some very small kind of way, but they're all very important. Then sustainability talks about how it should be something, or as we address food justice, the solution should be something that can be sustained throughout generations. So it's not just about our current generation right now, but that future generations can also sustain themselves. And that is not only, you know, for people, but also other beings and the planet itself. So we should not try to move towards things that are not gonna support other people's resilience or other species' resilience either. And then availability, which I think is one of the ones that often gets forgotten about and sometimes is difficult because, like I said, some food is better than no food. But when you think about it, when you get something that you actually can't eat or might not like or is literally detrimental to your health, then it really isn't helpful at all. I think about like food pantries when people donate a lot of canned food, which it can be helpful, but if I were to be someone who is maybe diabetic or has some sort of specific restriction and I'm already struggling with a lot of things, then I know that I'm either gonna eat that and worsen my health or I'm not gonna eat it at all. Additionally, there's just a lot of other compromises that you have to make, like just eating something that you might not even like because it's just what's available. And so taking into account exactly what availability means, I think is really important when donating things. It also means having things that are affordable. So that means having products that are on sale that people can buy, that will also, you know, support the people who are selling them, but the people that can buy it. And additionally, items that they want. So whether it's like culturally relevant, so things that they eat in their culture or in their religion or things like that, and pretty much feeds them in the way they want to be fed. This is a lot of things to move towards that I would say are like very wide, broad goal, right? We won't be able to hit every single thing perfectly, but it's important to at least have them so you can know that you're moving towards that goal, and that is the goal that we should go towards. Then I have a closer look at issues and solutions. Like I mentioned, food justice touches a lot of different things, and I think it's really important to highlight the intersectionality of it. It's more than getting people connected to food. It's about farmers' rights. It's about environmental justice. It's about land access. It's about educational access, because all these things contribute to people systematically not being able to access just and sustainable food for themselves. And I'm gonna just do a little quick history. So here there's an image of 1997 Black farmers protesting across the White House. This was during a time where USDA farmers were applying for grants, and there was a lot of instances where they were saying they were being discriminated by the USDA officers who were actually taking them in. This class action specifically has a really long history that's still going to this day. When it started, initially, it was pretty much ruled in their favor. Then later, other farmers pretty much ended up countersuing and naming what they would say is reverse racism. And they ended up winning. So now it's back again where people pretty much lost their land, then somewhat got it back, then it turned right back over. But as you can see, this has a long history where policies within our food system itself are affecting the people who are growing our food and or want to grow our food and are moving towards that. But I think it's important to really highlight it to see how long of a history it is, but also how intersectional it is here, specifically affecting the Black community, and a time where people were really trying to gain ownership back of resources that were once theirs and then taken away from them. Here we have a couple other instances. One of the ones that I think a lot of people know about are Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and the farmers movement, time where, you know, people were striking around grapes. And I think here specifically what I really wanted to highlight is how Black, Indigenous, and people of color have been really a backbone of a lot of the food justice movement, specifically is because these are the people that are mostly systematically impacted. They're the ones that are most marginalized. And the way I like to put it in perspective for people is that 98%, I think it is, here in Connecticut specifically, of farmers are white, or what people are considered farmers, right? When you look at the USDA census and are, marked as the owners. But the actual workforce of it is the total opposite, where most of the workers in farms are actually Black and brown folks. But that's really important to name because at the end of the day, if the people that are on the USDA census are the folks that are actually the ones who, whose feedback they are taking into account, then it's not really reflecting our food system, and it's also not reflecting the issues that people in our food system are facing. This is also the reason why I say that a lot of these issues are intersectionals. Specifically for me, one of the ones that jumps out the most is farmers and workers' rights here, because there really is no guidelines around how farmers are treated. There is no one really overseeing, and even to this day, there is no policy that monitors that. And that's something that they're working towards in the next Farm Bill, but they've named it specifically the Farm Bill. And most people think that it only affects farmers, but it actually affects all our food. Most of the funding and all the money that is in the Farm Bill pays for things like SNAP, EBT, like farm to school programs and all of that. So the Farm Bill really controls a lot of our food resources, even though it's not necessarily marketed that way. And often the people who actually give feedback and get to change or show up are not the people who are most affected by those policies in those spaces. So then actions and approaches. So I made a really long list, and I could probably keep going on, but I wanted to just name pretty much what everybody could do or what they can get involved in. And you can't do everything, but doing something is better than nothing. And also I find that doing something locally is better as well, because it's your direct community. You're doing something that's probably going to support your neighbor or, local folks nearby. So, there's from skill preservation to growing food to donating it, to donating money, to seed saving, to land protection. I would say look at what, kind of calls your skill set or your heart the most and just kind of go for it. There's a lot of organizations that are already doing this work and are pretty well established. But there's also a lot of grassroots initiatives that people are doing. I know today you'll be learning how to, start seeds. And I think for me, that's one of the big things that I wish more people would just do is start growing food. That's a pretty good step to contributing back to the food justice system. One, because if you learn how to grow food well, then you end up having a surplus and then you can donate food. And then two, if you start learning how gardens and growing food actually works, then you can move towards other things like seed saving, which are actually really impactful because there's a lot of species and crops that we have lost because we haven't been able to save their seeds. And then also because you get to often create a community around gardening. So you get to either invite friends, folks, family members, you get to give food away. And I think gardening, at least maybe I'm biased because that's what I do, but I think is one of the easiest and most accessible things to do. And then second is just educate yourself, just learn more, talk to more people, ask more people about their experiences. When you are growing or farming, just ask more questions. Then this is a project that we did through the Windham Community Food Network. So the Windham Community Food Network is this kind of hub in the Windham area that connects a lot of food resources and advocacy agencies, gardens. And we did this landscape assessment. Can I click on that link? Will it pop up if I do it? Cool. So this is a map that everybody could access. And this is a really cool map. So pretty much on this map, and I think, so we partnered up with pretty much most of Eastern Connecticut services. If you go on this map, you can find community gardens, food pantries, local organizations, And there's a whole key, so you can see we focused on this region specifically because we knew that this region was one of the places that wasn't getting enough surveying, and also we just found lack of representation in a lot of other surveys. So you can go on this map, and you can also submit if you know an agency, farm, retailer, anything like that, that is working towards supporting people to access foods, but there's also markets. So the goal was that this tool would hopefully help community members to engage in more things, but it would also help community members to know what's around them if they ever do need more access to food or are struggling with that already. So there's food pantries and things like that on here as well. And so like if you were to click on them, it'll tell you the location, the name, like a contact person, numbers, and things like that. And there's a lot of different maps like this that exist, but even just going on this map and looking at what there is great. Other way to really support food justice system is to support your local food system. So like contributing to CSAs, buying from local farmers, and trying to keep things local to keep our economy circulating here. But yeah, I wanted to make sure I share this resource with y'all. And this is on the Wyndham Food website. Go back right here. And if you wanted to look at this report, there's a bunch of information here on the New London area as well. We did a lot of surveying. The goal with this project was to pretty much survey the spaces and see where the gaps are. So see where maybe in the food system there isn't necessarily a solution already happening, or where there is already so many people backing a solution that we can move forward to something more innovative and that will support the communities around. And then this is the website. So these are a lot of links. I put Fresh New London's link there. I put the New Connecticut Farmers Alliance link. I put a couple articles that folks can read and learn more about. It's just some more content and things to engage with if you want to continue learning about this or engage in things locally here. And that is all I got for y'all.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you can scan that QR code again if you want to.
Thank you.
Do you have like when did you first begin like gardening and feeling like more connected to that and sort of pursuing that?
So I grew up with farmers in my family. Most of them had grown up farming in like exploitive settings. And so when I joined Grow Wyndham, I think it was like in 2012 or so, I was in high school, so I was 16 years old. It was the first time I had ever like even engaged in some sort of growing. For most of my life, growing was looked at something that like was something you just did because you needed to survive. And at that point, I still didn't understand how many issues were connected to growing our food and food access. But in that time, the reason that I really stuck around with Grow Wyndham is because I met other leaders in the program who were also working towards immigrants' rights, which was an issue that was super connected to my family and me specifically, and farmers' rights. And that was a time when I started to really think more about like the food system and how it's currently ran. I started engaging in more things, and then I went to college. So I was in Grow Wyndham until I was like 19. I went to college. I graduated in 2020, and I really needed a job. So I was like, oh my God, the pandemic, what am I gonna do? And Grow Wyndham was hiring for a community farmer. And I was like, I know how to do that, I can do it. So I went back to Grow Wyndham and I started growing again. And when I graduated from college, most of my family and other peers looked at me like, why are you farming? Like, I thought you went to college to not do that. Because for them, farming has always been exploitive. They had never seen a different model. They had always seen that if you were farming, you probably weren't earning enough and you probably weren't really even sustaining yourself. They had not seen something different. And to explain to them that and that farming can be sustainable and it's a completely different ballgame when you're surrounded in a place of community, kind of took a long time because they had this long history of distrusting, like just being like, why would you do that? And I don't trust people in those sort of spaces. So that was a long conversation. But after 2 growing seasons, I decided like this is what I want to do. Like I want to continue to farm. I want to continue to be involved in this work because I saw that it could be done sustainably. And by then I had met so many farmers that did run farms in a very equitable and just way. And I had not seen that yet. So now I'm in a different role at Groton as co-director, but one of my long-term goals is to start my own farm. And one of the reasons I really want to do that is 1, for representation, but 2, also to show people that folks who do look like me can do that, and it is sustainable. And to also show other different types of business models to people around us that farming doesn't have to be exploitive. And growing our food that way isn't the only way that it can be done, because I think a lot of people in my community who grow, around in local farms think that's true. I think a lot of people like to think that like injustices or things like of the history that I showed you are things of the past, but those are things that are happening today still. Like literally towns over, there's still exploitation, there's still slavery in these farms. And by not talking about these issues, we're contributing directly to those things to continue to be perpetuated. And it's a really hard topic, I think, to talk about because it hits like really hard, like, oh, how can that still be happening? But the alternative is continuing to let these things go and continue to let our food system be tainted in this way. So, yeah.
I know you had the whole amazing list of things that folks can do, and I was just wondering in terms of, I know we're limited in the state of Connecticut, and you gave that right percentage and data in terms of white farmers owning the majority of the farms, and I know just in terms of like land protection and thinking about like land back, because I know a lot of indigenous seed savers are really keeping those seeds for their nations and their people.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to think about just within locally, I know Rhode Island there are different farms that are run by different indigenous people, but I didn't know if there are any connections here in Connecticut too with getting farms run that were based on any local nations, or I know we just...
I think with indigenous people specifically, the best thing you can do is try to connect with someone who is already established in doing that work. Or if you know someone who is indigenous directly and is already doing that work, support them to do that work, as they are the ones that, really we want to continue to keep going their culture and their traditions, and they're the ones that know best. But they also have a long history of distrust. And like this is something that I've run into as well as I'm trying to reach out to indigenous communities. And that distrust is like totally like well established, and like I think that's something that is going to take a lot of hard work and a lot of conversations of, it's not just like, hey, can I come help, or can I come support, or can I help save your seeds? It's like, no, I don't know you. And like I've been wronged too many times in the past when someone has come and said this to me. So I don't have one direct source right now for you. If I do find one, I can send it over. But it is a really, I would say the interpersonal conversations and connections are the most important, because there is a lot of trust that has been lost. And to build up those relationships again is going to take a lot of time and a lot of showing up and a lot of talking and a lot of following through with small things. Even like with my organization, like even when like people reach out and they're like, I want to do this big thing. And I'm like, totally. And 20 other people have told me that they want to do that big thing. And like the probability of those 20 people following through is very, very small. So that's why I say like start most directly with who is around you and accessible, and move in that way and continue to have the conversations and talks. Yeah.
If you want to say grow extra food, how do you know what may be needed for different cultures within the community? I know like Farmer Craig found out that there was a desire for okra, so in his giving garden he started that, but I wasn't sure if there was an easier way of finding out what the community would want.
I think the easiest way is to just ask, and it sounds like kind of simplistic, but it really is just that. So like for us, when we look at our population in our community and we're like, okay, it's majority Mexican and Guatemalan communities here. And so we have youth in our program, and we're like, what do y'all eat? And they're like, well, we eat more like tomatillo, cilantro, epazote, like these sort of things. These are the dishes that we make, and this is what goes in it. So I would say that literally just asking, if there is an already established organization like say Fresh New London, they have that information already. Like you can ask them and be like, what does your community need? You can also go to like pantries and be like, what do you guys mostly need? And they'll be like, oh, we always run out of tomatoes, or there's always this thing that we need more fresh things of. And there really isn't like a big thing like, oh, I have to go survey a bunch of, someone probably has access to that information already, and just asking directly will give you a quick answer.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. With Grow Wyndham, 'cause I'm familiar with Fresh. Is it set up similarly where you have like community beds available for people to use?
Yeah, so we have our Lauder Park garden where our youth program specifically grows in, and we have all the produce that goes there. It goes to our community table program, which is a food box program where we pretty much cater. We have a survey of every member who's in the program, and we cater to them and their needs. And then we have a whole other side where plotters get to rent spaces to grow their own food, and if they have surplus, they can donate as well. We also partner up with Click, which is the commercially licensed cooperative kitchen in Willimantic. And what we do is buy directly from farmers, bring all that produce to Click, and then we build boxes. And then that way we're supporting local farmers and paying them a market rate price, but also giving away food to people who need it as well. Yeah.
I had another question about what are some ways, like you sort of alluded to how sometimes people don't necessarily have the cultural sensitivity to know, like what are things where people may have really good intentions at food pantries or somewhere else, but maybe don't have the impact they would want it to have? Like where does people's kind of good intentions, when they're not familiar with the issues or with people or with pantries in general, like where do you see things kind of going awry?
I mean, sometimes it's systematically really hard. Like I think about food pantries, and a lot of their actual like workforce or labor comes from volunteering, right? So you're not paying someone to show up all the time, and you don't really have the staffing to meet those needs. So like, for example, for our food program, we are like catering the boxes, but we have a coordinator that we pay to show up to do the surveying, to put each product that they want in the box, to see how many people are in the household, to see if someone's diabetic. If you have a large population of people that are dealing with food insecurity, and it's kind of a line system, then you can't always do that. So it's hard to give like direct solutions because the issue is not like just one layered. It's like so many things that you would have to fix to get it like perfect, right? But if it's like donating food, I think the number one thing is to just, again, ask directly to the food pantry, like, could you tell me specifically what items you want, right? Because sometimes food pantries will do like a donation of just anything because they're just wanting anything at that point. People just need nourishment. But if someone were to just ask the pantry, like, what are actually the items that people really like? They'll tell you, like, oh, well, we actually really need fresh produce, or really need rice, or actually, we would actually really like instant milk because people don't have fridges and it's really hard for them to store those items. Or if you have any diabetic-friendly things because people are struggling with this, or gluten-free things. And I think often people think, well, like, people just be happy with anything. But often the anything ends up being nothing because people can't even eat it because it's going to affect their health worse anyways. So I think the good intentions are great, but also it's just like one more step of like, well, what do you guys actually need? And sometimes it's like, well, those places might actually prefer whatever you were going to spend on those food items, just the money, because then they can actually use it in the way that they need to use the money. That is like my big thing. If you do have extra funds or extra time, that's often more helpful than like a direct product, because the probability of sometimes that direct product being the exact thing that they need is not as high. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I have one last question.
Yeah.
Like what, since the pandemic, and I know you kind of started there again in 2020, but even since 2020, like what kinds of changes have you noticed in terms of like need and ability and capacity? Because there's It's been hard
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
Yeah, 2020 was, super hard. I mean, one thing that I will say is that a lot of communities ended up being very resilient and resourceful because they needed to be. They needed to feed their communities. They needed to show up regardless. I think the food system saw a really big shift because we ended up realizing that we can't be relying on the government or other programs that are ran through that funding specifically, because things just weren't being managed as well as, and if there was grant or money that was funding things, it was taking forever for it to actually come in, which I think, as hard as the pandemic was, it was also kind of pushed us moving towards, really working as a community with our resources and what we had around us to make it happen. And I think those are the best solutions when you don't have to rely on other people. So one thing that I mentioned here is sliding scale models or reduced cost things, which are some things that are popping up more where people are paying a little bit more if they can, so other people can pay a little bit less, but also making sure that they're still paying whoever's making the products or produce an equitable wage. Which I think is something innovative that came out of those times, because people were we need to feed people. It just kind of needs to happen. But there was also other intersectional issues that were skyrocketed completely. I would say housing is one of the biggest ones. A lot of people became homeless because they had to choose, again, between basic necessities. Was it food or housing? And if I can't eat or do these other things, then I'm just not going to survive. So if there's another issue that you think about it systematically, it might not be directly growing food or donating to food, but if there's another issue addressing the housing crisis, then I think that's also super helpful, because those people are also people that are probably struggling with food access, or other issues that were heightened during that time as well. That's all I got. Thanks, y'all.
I'm Margie Sidney, new Master Gardener, graduated last year, and so this is one of my volunteer outreach projects. So thanks for inviting us. It was kind of a fun thing, and a seed starting is definitely kind of in my wheelhouse. It's something I've been doing for a long time, and it's not as intimidating as some people might seem. Not always easy, but it's definitely a doable thing for anybody. Just curious, as far as the crowd here, is everyone familiar? Have ever started plants from seeds, or is this something that you do every year? Anyone who not ever grown from seeds? Okay, a couple? Okay.
I always talk too early though.
Okay, food seeds. I didn't bring any flower seeds, but since this is more of a food justice talk anyway. I apologize, when I grabbed the seeds, the majority of them are kind of meant for direct sowing, meaning planting into your garden versus in a seed pack. Although there's a few, and I'll talk about the few that of that pack that you can do from seeds. So my first thing that I think about is why even bother? As far as planting from seeds, it's so much easier just to go to the nursery and buy your little 6-pack and pop it in the ground. And there's a few reasons for that. I mean, certainly there's a whole lot more variety available out there. I brought a couple of catalogs, New England Seeds, Johnny's Seeds, even Ocean State Job Lot, Burt. There are so many different varieties that the nurseries can't carry all.
We're back.
Okay. So you can really be very specialized in the varieties that you can find in the catalogs. Way more economical, certainly, a pack of seeds from free to, maybe even if you spent $5 for a pack of, special organic seeds, is going to save you a whole lot more money than if you were to buy the plant, individually. And so you can get way more plants from, a single pack of seeds than you would from the store. And the seeds last. I mean, you can, it might say it's packed for, 2023, but you can save them for several years and then continue to grow them year after year. So you get more than your money's worth. Plants that are grown from seeds are, they tend to be healthier. They're a lot less stressed. They're not root bound from what you might find in the nurseries. You control the environment for them, so you make sure that they're healthy and given everything that they need to be a nice big plant for yourself. And you have more control over the timing when you start your seed, so you can extend your seed season either a little earlier or go on later into the year if you want more of the fall plants. So you have that wiggle room that way. Excuse me. And then the other thing that I'd like to is, with the variety available, is you can experiment. There's no, you can try different varieties. Everyone knows what a black beauty eggplant is, but there's so many different types of eggplants. And one thing I learned from Fresh is, some of the other, culturally relevant plants you might not be familiar with, but you might like Mexican food, or you might like Asian food, and it's like, why not? You can grow an Asian eggplant or tomatillos. Love tomatillos, so you can experiment and play with it. So that's pretty much why. So what do seeds need to do to grow and germinate? A few things. First, moisture, and basically what the seed needs to happen. What needs to happen to the seed is that the seed coat needs to break down. It needs to absorb water, and then the hormones within the seed gets it to sprout and grow, and you have a little seedling. So moisture is the first thing. Water, not too much that it's going to rot, but it has to be moist. Once a seedling does sprout, you have to keep it moist. If it dries out and it dies, then you're starting over. Heat, most seeds are stimulated by warmth. Some don't need as much warmth. Those are your cool weather plants. Some won't even think about sprouting until it's hot enough. In my house, I have a heat mat that I use, and a whole grow light system. Not necessary, but if you can provide some warmth. Before I had the heat mats, I would put the tray on top of my oil furnace burner. Just a little bit of warmth, and that was enough to get it going. You need nice moisture retaining loose soil for the seedling to sprout, and loose enough that it can kind of make its way up through the dirt. Seed to soil contact, you don't want a lot of air in the soil, so the seed needs to feel the soil around it. And for some seeds, they need a little bit of light. Most seeds you do so about twice the depth of the seed, but some seeds need that light to germinate, and it will usually specify on that. All right, so as far as anatomy of a seed packet, and this is where we're going to look here, and I use a lot of my information I use from this one company called Fruition Seeds. They're an organic seed company out of upstate New York. They sell seeds, and they have a lot of great information. But all of you have more like the burpee seeds, and then this is from New England. All seed companies provide at least the basic information that you need so that you can successfully sow your seeds. And they, of course, they all will have the species and the variety name. Okay, it'll say whether it's conventional, or certainly if it's organic, it'll specify organic, and that means that the plant that the seed came from was raised through organic means right through the seed stage, and then those seeds are classified as organic. Any special characteristics, you know, as far as is it a bush type plant, is it a pole or climbing plant, is it, you know, special as far as what type of cooking you would use it for, or shape of the fruit. Disease resistance. A lot of plants are bred to be resistant of a lot of the funguses that can affect your plants. So they will specify that. Okay, on the back, it will usually say the quantity and the row feet a seed packet will sow. So when you're figuring out how many packets of seeds, or how far can I go with this one packet, let me find it on my seed packet here. 6 to 5 days maturity, 2 to 3 feet tall. And tell me, I'm looking on the burpee seeds. Tell me if anyone finds where. Yeah, usually it'll say 25 seeds will be like 100-foot row, and so you can kind of figure that out. And they all kind of put things in a little different place. Plant spacing. They always have a quantity, but sometimes they'll say that 15 seeds, 100-foot row. There will always be the size of what the mature plant will be. Once it's completely grown, tomatoes or a lot of vining plants they will continue to grow indefinitely. Days to maturity, and that's important to know, like when to expect when the harvest will be. And the days to maturity, my understanding is for the warmer weather plants like tomatoes and eggplants, peppers, the days to maturity is from the date you set it in the ground outside, not when you start it the 6 weeks before. Is that what you do? So if anyone does something different, please let me know. But that's how you would find out. So say for this tomato, where it says days to maturity 80, if I put it out, say Mother's Day, in the middle of May, I can expect to get it by August. That's when you'll start harvesting those tomatoes. Okay. All the seeds will be marked with the year that it was meant for market. So a lot of the seeds that are here are from 2023, from last year's. Perfectly fine seeds, but they have to mark it here because the vendors, the merchants, can only sell within that year. But it's good to know. Again, I'm still sowing seeds that are 10 years old, but eventually they're going to be, they're not going to germinate as well as they get older. Okay. And then the growing instructions. Now the growing instructions will usually give you an idea of when to sow, and a lot of times that will be in terms of weeks before your last expected frost date is. For our area down here, our zones have actually changed, and we're now along the coastline here, we're probably more in the zone 7A, where it typically was 6B, which it means that the coldest day in the winter that we would experience, 6B, I think, went down to 10 degrees below zero. 10 degrees below zero. 7 is more like 5 degrees to 0 degrees below. So with climate change, what's been happening is the zones are getting bumped up. So we're about half a grade warmer now. So when you're planning out, when you're going to sow your seeds, say eggplant, peppers, and tomatoes are your warmer weather plants, and those need to be sown indoors first because they need that time. And it'll say 6 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost date. So I could have started these earlier because now we're kind of getting into April, but it's not such a bad thing either because you don't want to start your plants too early, because then you might make the mistake that I've done when you get too excited and you want to go and get started. I sowed these Chinese cabbage the end of February. Too early, but because I'm not ready yet to put anything out in my yard. So that means I need to pot these up, make them into a little bigger container so that they can still get the nutrients they need and not just struggle in these little cell plants before I put them outside. So that's important to kind of consider the timing. On the packet also it will say, how deeply to sow. Many seeds are usually, it'll say like between a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch. The general rule of thumb is like 1.5 to 2 times the thickness of the seed. And you think a 1/4 inch, you don't have to go with the ruler, but you think about like your fingernail, your little pinky fingernail. If you go around and you stick your finger into the soil down to that depth, that's roughly about a 1/4 inch. So that's a real quick, easy, go bing, 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 and you got your 1/4 inch. And then the other thing on the thing is spacing. And spacing is important to know in this after thinning, because as the plants are growing in your garden, they need to have the space required for their size at maturity. So for the Chinese cabbage, I generally grow in like a square foot garden method where it's like 4 by 4. So I would put 4 Chinese cabbage in per square foot, and that'll give it enough space there. But it will say here seed thin to 18 inches or thin to 12 inches after, as they're growing up. Making sense? Okay. I think I got everything.
So would you put you have a square foot, you put a cabbage in each corner?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I did
yeah.
that in a flower pot because we
Yeah.
have struggle with the deer.
And a lot, and on a lot of the seed packets too, especially if it's something appropriate for containers, they'll say 4 plants per 12-inch pot, something like that. Okay, so what do you need to get started? And I brought out some of my things here, and what I have at home, and this is just because I've been doing it a long time, and I seem to be growing more and more things from seeds. Is I do have a grow light system, shelving units with grow lights. And trays, and I can pass this around. This is just from Gardener's Supply Company, and they're fine for kind of seeing what's out there, what's available. They're kind of on the pricey side. You can usually kind of take a look and then shop somewhere else. But that's what I have. It's like a 3-shelf unit with trays, and then I can pass this around too. That's my little potato from last year. But these are some of the plants, and then the garden outside. So you can just kind of pass that around. But basics that you need, and that you don't need to go this elaborate. And you can just have a nice sunny window, and as long as the seedlings are getting what they need, you don't have to get so elaborate. You do need containers. You need a place for your seedlings to grow from. I use a lot of the little 6-pack cells, and I reuse them, just clean them out well. And certainly if you've had history of any kind of fungal diseases and stuff, you might want to use a little more bleach solution, make sure it's really clean. Cell packs, Yogurt cups, as long as they have holes drilled in them. You don't, it has to have drainage. Anything that's soil blocks, you'll be learning about soil blocks next week. Or fiber pots like the peat moss, compressed peat moss or cow pots. Those are nice because then you can just pop the whole thing right into the ground and they'll decompose in the soil. Okay. You don't want to go too big right from the start, mostly because it takes up space, it takes up soil, that you might want to conserve and pot up as they grow. The growing medium, there's a few different ways you can go. They have commercial soilless starting mix, which is usually in equal parts of peat moss, perlite, and vermiculite. There are no, in those where it says soilless, there are no nutrients in that soil, so it's fine for the seedlings to get started and sprout. But generally, once they have their second set of leaves, they need to eat. They need food. Their seed will only take them so far. So the other option is you can get growing medium seed starting mix that has the compost, the perlite, vermiculite, and some micronutrients. I make myself my own growing mix. And from here, what I use is my compost. And then, are people familiar with perlite, vermiculite? Perlite's always the little white pearls that you see in your potting soil. Vermiculite, these both are good for both drainage and actually maintaining some of the water, keeping the water, the vermiculite. And then this is a seed starting fertilizer that I mix in with the soil. And this was available through Fish and Seeds, but I think there are other, even if you use Osmocote or, you don't have to be organic, if that's not your thing, but you can mix that into your potting soil as well. You don't want to go too overboard too early with fertilizer because being so young, they're easy to burn and get overdone. And then the other thing, instead of peat moss, I've been using more of the coconut, is it coir? It's shredded coconut fiber is compressed, and then all you do is you add water to it and it expands, and it's this really nice loose peat moss-like material that you mix in, and that helps retain moisture and really keeps the soil nice and loose. So you need another, if you're going to do your own, you need a tub to mix all that in. Water, obviously. The trays, this is one of the trays from my grow light. But anything, even if it's an old cookie sheet, just something to catch the water. Again, it doesn't have to be super fancy. Labels, very important. Especially if you're growing more of one variety of one thing, because I'm pretty well know I'll have like 6 different types of tomatoes, 4 different types of peppers, and if I don't label them, they all look the same. So labels are very important. The plastic water, certainly. Plastic domes, baggies, plastic wrap. I do use, my set came with like a humidity dome, little plastic cover that goes over this, and I will use that only up until they germinate. Then I take the lid off, because otherwise there's a risk of getting fungal disease damping off, and that moisture might be too much. The other issue, sometimes you have too much moisture or fungus gnats, then you don't want to. And then that can just be more of a nuisance. All right. Okay. again, light is really important. So if you don't have a whole lighting system with grow lights, a really bright sunny window, and that's important. Not so much before they germinate, but as soon as they germinate, you got to get them into the light, and it needs to be a fairly strong one, so that if you have it on a windowsill, if it's not strong enough, you're going to notice the plants are going to want to like grow and lean, and either you're going to be spinning them every day to try to keep them straight, or you need to find a sunnier window, just to keep them growing straight. If you do have a grow light, they recommend that you put the light 6 to 12 inches just above. My system, I can like adjust the light as it grows. But if you keep it nice and close, the idea is you want your plants to grow straight and stout. You don't want them long and spindly. And heat mat is optional, as mentioned before, but that can really speed up your germination, especially the temperature sensitive seeds. The cooler it is, the longer it's going to take for those seeds to sprout. Okay. And then I don't have on that slide, but I also put down fertilizer. This I do have put in the starting mix of the soils. But once I do get to this size here, I might use diluted fertilizer, and usually it'll be like fish emulsion, which is, you just dilute that like 1 ounce to a gallon of water, and even weaker for the seedlings. You can either mist them or put it in the water from below. All right, so any questions so far? Yeah.
Any cheap recommendations if you're growing with kids? I've used like the milk jugs and drainage, and just kind of making our own little mini greenhouses almost. We have a great sunny window, but I'm always looking for just new, easy, reusable ways that we can do it year to year, and then that they can take the plants home to their families too, and then transplant.
So the yogurt cups, the little milk containers. One thing that was popular at some point were like 8 cartons. Don't bother with 8 cartons. There was not enough soil in that little cup of dirt to do anything with. Yogurt cups, milk cartons. Any other suggestions? Any other little plastic containers, as long as there are holes drilled down through the bottom of them that way?
What
that
are
would
the
work.
Recommendations in terms of like other recycled materials or something other than like plastic wraps?
Paper. I've had people make like newspaper pots.
Or like on top as they're germinating, like just to keep it warm and.
Baggies. You can just put a little baggie over a cup, and I poke a hole or two in it just so that air can go through.
And sometimes it's to keep other little hands from grabbing them too. So.
Yeah. And then once they do sprout, take that plastic sheet off. All right. Okay. Yeah.
You had mentioned that you use seeds that have been around a while, more than a year or two. How do you know if the seeds are good or not? Do you put them in water, and are the floaters the icky ones, or the sinkers the icky ones?
I've heard that technique, and I don't remember which.
Okay.
I know if you have like a lot, like like lettuce seeds usually comes like hundreds in a little packet. You can the test to see if they're viable is you would take 10 seeds and a wet paper towel. Okay, you moisten the paper towel, you line them up, fold them up, and then wait. And then after the amount of time, that should be 7 to 10 days, you look how many seeds have sprouted, and that'll give you your germination rate. So if it's less than, if it's less than 6 of the 10, then they're probably kind of getting old. You can probably still use them, but you want to put instead of 1 or 2 seeds per little cell, you might want to put 3 or 4 and see what sprouts, and do it that way. Yeah, I don't. Once you wet those seeds and sink or swim, I don't know. It's like, what how do you fish those little things out?
Kind of like cleaning blueberries. The floaters are the sour ones and the sweet ones.
Oh yes, I mean there are a lot of little tips and tricks that way, but so basically what I thought I would do, I don't know if this if this seems helpful to you guys, is kind of go through the sowing seeds instructions. Are we on time? Are we good?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So this is my sowing, my soil mixture here, and typically I would take this and I would wet this thoroughly. I would really get it nice and moist, not so soggy that if I pick up a ball of it, I'm wringing water out, but it's going to make a ball. If it's too dry, and this is a little bit on the dry side, it's just going to crumble in my hands. So I would add more water until it's a good wetness. But just for demonstrating, I'm going to use this little 6-pack, and we'll fill the container. And I'll fill it right up to the top. You can kind of push it down a little bit. And then to help get rid of some of the air pockets in here, you want to, so it'll be filled right to the top. You're going to take it and you're going to tamp, kind of just tamp it down, really kind of give it a good wrap. And that'll help get rid of some of the air pockets, because the seeds need that soil contact. Okay, so here's my 6-pack, and say I'll do my tomatoes. So this is a New England seed Beefmaster hybrid, and it says planting depth 1/4. All right, in-house 5 to 6 weeks before planting out, which is probably about right. Usually I'm planting out like between Mother's Day and Memorial Day, later in May for the warmer seeds. And since these are from last year, 2023. Oh, these suckers are tiny. See, my eyeballs are working tonight. So usually I'll kind of put a few out. And some of the seeds, like I grew lobelia, I have growing at home, and those seeds, they're like dust. They're so tiny. And there are special little tools, and one tip I did learn from Fruition, that's a plug anyone company, but I love these guys. Fruition Seeds, they do all sorts of online tutorials and stuff. And one of her tips there was for the very tiny seeds is you could take a toothpick and you just wet the tip of the toothpick, and you kind of roll it into your little bit of seeds, and then you can just gently, you can just pick up just 1 or 2 little seeds that way, and then stick the toothpick into the dirt. Have you ever done anything like that? Or
Yeah, I usually have to be really careful with it.
yeah, I mean the tiny.
It like be around wind. It'll
Yeah.
Farmer Craig uses a little a paintbrush, like a watercolor brush,
Uh-huh.
and dampens it, and that helps pick up the seeds.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'm plunking in two seeds in each little hole that I just made with my fingertip. And even if I get 100% germination, I mean that means instead of 6 I'll have 12. It is important to pick one. Yeah, and thin them out, because otherwise they'll be competing for space and food, and you won't have a really good plant. Some things that you are thinning, like the cabbage or the broccoli or basil, I don't munch them. I mean, they're good. They're delicious. So I covered a little bit with that. Sometimes I'll take some of my vermiculite and I'll put the covering with that on top, and then mist it all down. All right. So this would all be nice and damp. The seeds are down in the soil. I find my right label. And it goes onto the heat mat. Okay. All right. So that's my tomatoes. So they'll go home and they'll get watered and then go on my heat mat. So that's real quick on that one. Once they're germinated, again, you want to get them under light right away. Bottom water. Don't just pour water over the top, because especially before they've germinated, because you're going to wash them away and disperse it. But water it from the bottom in your tray, and that'll bring the water right on up. Okay. Talked about thinning. Transplant to the next size up as they outgrow, and before the roots get too crowded. Root-bound seedlings are stressed seedlings. They're looking for a place to go, and if they start circling the pot, they've been in the pot too long. And unfortunately, what you find in the stores, there a lot of times are already that way. So to pot up, again, you're gonna get your soil mixture in here, because these are really, if it was a little warmer, a little drier, I'd be out there this weekend and getting these guys in the garden, because they're ready. This is Chinese cabbage. It's a little dry, guys, sorry about that. But you can, I don't know if you can see, this has kind of fine roots, but they're out there. It's not too root bound, but it's ready to go up to a bigger pot. And again, it's probably only going to be like another week, but because there's only so much nutrition here, and unless I fertilize it, it's not going to have what it really needs. So when you do transplant, you always want to bring the soil or plant it just as deeply as the base of the plant as it's growing out. You don't want to bury it down, because then that base will begin to rot. And the only plant that's not the case really are the tomatoes. All right, because they have, if you notice on a tomato stalk, they're kind of fuzzy and furry. And if you bury that deeper, they will turn into roots, and they'll form roots, and you'll have a nice strong tomato plant. But for anything else, don't go too deep. So this is this guy.
So do you harden your seedlings before you put them out?
Yep, hardening off basically is giving the plant time to transition from my nice cozy basement to being outside in all the environment, in all the elements, the rain and the wind. So that basically means, say, like a week or so before you're ready to plant out in the garden. You bring your plants outside, and it's somewhat protected. Don't put it out in the blazing sun, but put it outside where it can get some natural sunlight, and protected from the wind. And gradually, for the daytime only for the first couple of days, and then you can let it be outdoors overnight for a couple of days, and then into the garden. And that's good, good practice for most of the plants that you start inside, just to give them a chance to not go into total shock when they, it gets rained on, or they have, a cold night, and certain plants are definitely going to be more tolerant to the cold than others. This is definitely a pretty cold hardy plant. Any of the cabbages and broccolis and spinach, those are cold hardy. The tomatoes, they're not as cold tolerant, but they're a little more forgiving than, say, peppers. If you put peppers out too soon, they won't forgive you, and they'll you won't have as nearly as an abundant harvest as if you waited. So soil temperature when you so this is starting seeds inside. Starting seeds outside is appropriate for a lot of the plants that you can put the seeds directly into the garden. And most of the seeds that I brought tonight are good for going right into the garden. As far as your beans, radish, any root crop, your radishes, carrots, you can't transplant those successfully. And some plants just don't like being transplanted and having those roots disturbed. So in one of the charts that you all got, there is a handout with the seeds that can be direct sown. And the ones that have an asterisk, you can start inside and then move out. But they do better if they're also direct sown, depending on that. Again, you're still dependent on the soil temperature. A lot of crops before it's 50. The warm weather crops need nighttime temperatures no less than 50 degrees. So still way too early for those guys. But your other spinach, peas, the brassicas can start going outside. The only problem right now is so muddy and so wet. So you might want to give the soil a chance to drain and dry out. Okay. Consider the plant space requirements when you're sowing outside. Again, I do a lot of the square foot gardening, and this is a good book. I'm aging myself here a little bit, but it's a really good resource as far as what the different crops need, how to lay out a square foot garden, and it's just a good way if you're limited on space, that you don't have to do row by row, because just the walking rows in between take up so much space, whereas square foot garden is just a little more efficient. The nice thing about this book, then you can go in the back, each plant, say broccoli, they'll tell you 1 broccoli per square, and so you can kind of map it out that way. So that's a good book there. Trellising for any of your climbing plants, your cucumbers and squashes and pole beans. Nice way to grow, because they're growing vertically. They don't take as much space, but they need something to climb up on.
And Margie, I just wanted to let you know we're at 5 minutes to 7:30.
Okay.
Just a time check.
All right. So yeah, well, actually pretty good. So other big thing that I do, as you get started with starting seeds, is it's really important. Keep a little journal. Write down your date, the seeds, when you planted them, when they sprouted, when you transplanted them, and then this way you can go back, year after year and say, okay, like this year I'm gonna say, wait, started way too early. Let's wait a couple of weeks, and you can jot notes, and depending on how motivated I am on any particular year, I'll have more or less information here. I did leave a couple of resources here. The only other thing on the last slide on the bottom. All right, so keep a planting journal. So the people will be able to get this online. Here are some of my resources here. The Rise and Shine book is from Fruition. Yukon Home and Garden Education Center, that's part affiliated with the Master Gardeners, the website's there. The one website I neglected to put down is the New London Master Gardeners website, and email is, if anyone wants to write it down, is New London Master Gardeners at UConn.edu, UConn.edu. Oh, thank you. Ooh. Plural, gardeners, right?
Okay.
Yeah. .edu. Thank you, yeah. And we do have in the back, Joanne. Joanne is a coordinator for the New London extension, and we have forms back there. You know, if you have any gardening problems, questions, issues, you can always email us, or you can, you know, if you have anything pressing, you can fill out a little form there, and we'll be happy to, you know, volunteers to get in touch with you. And there's also brochures on, if you're interested in becoming a Master Gardener, there are applications for that as well. Any other questions? No?
Bravo.
We're good?
Thank you.
All right.